going on, student athletes? Maximus Petruccio here with this very, very special episode of the Diesel University podcast. Today we're at the Trench Academy here in Tampa Bay, Florida, the premier football training facility with over 70 NFL draft picks and 50 players under NFL contracts. Right now, we're here interviewing Taylor Scott, the founder, owner, and operator of Trench Academy. Let's get right into the interview. Let's go, baby. There's not enough athlete exposure in the north, at least like north of New York, basically. So I wanted to kind of showcase those athletes. And I feel like a traitor a little bit because I left Massachusetts, came down to Florida.
Right, to the Mecca.
To the Mecca, so I can, immerse myself in that atmosphere and then come back and bring all the knowledge and experience and everything that I've gained.
That's actually really cool. That's actually kind of one of my, dreams as well. Is I'm from a small town, I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas, but really grew up in a town right outside of Little Rock, and Arkansas is a very interesting place. There's definitely the good side and the bad side, I would say, and there's a lot of phenomenal athletes. But the problem is with the culture there, a lot of athletes just don't make it. They just don't make it out, and there's not the kind of resources that you find in Florida that can get a lot of these kids off the streets and into sports. Because I find all the time, with things like our program and great youth football organizations and things like that, these kids really have an outlet to go to, and especially when you talk about like inner city Little Rock, there's nothing for these guys. And I can't tell you how many players I knew that were some of the most talented players I'd ever played with in my life that never even got the opportunity just because of things outside of school and things outside of football and things they fell into, and unfortunately that's a pretty large statistic out of there. So like I've always felt like obviously when I came down to Florida, the market here is huge. I remember when I was probably the first person in my family to ever get a Division I scholarship for anything, and then on top of that, especially sports, and then I think my year in high school, I was one of 16 athletes, I think, in the entire state that got Division I scholarships. But the crazy thing is that doesn't near justify the kind of athletes that are there. It came down to grades, it came down to off the field stuff, and there's so much talent down there. And I would love to one day take a program like this and figure out how to make it affordable, figure out how to reach that and really give back to my hometown and my home state. That would be a very exciting thing for me to do. But obviously right down here in Florida, like, as you know, this is the market, right? This is where people at when you look around, it's like, if you live in any kind of nice neighborhood, there's probably 3 NFL players that live in that neighborhood. That's not Arkansas, right? And then on top of that, when it comes down to like, where the pro guys want to train and where the NFL combine guys want to go, you're not going to talk them into going into, the outskirts of Little Rock to go train, right? Yeah. So, for where we're at, this is definitely the place for me to be, but I would just love to be able to find a way to take what we've built here and reach like the small town USA, because there's so much hidden talent out there. They just don't have ways to develop it. I look at states like, California and Texas and Ohio, and they've done such a good job from a state standpoint of having programs that develop these kids. I've talked to so many college coaches and college recruiters that have literally said to me, they're like, we go to, California, or they'll say, we go to we go to Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida to recruit talent, but we go to Texas, Ohio, and California to recruit ball players. Mm-hmm. And basically what that means is when they come down here and when they go these other places, they find just absolutely incredible talent, but it's underdeveloped, right? And then when they go to those other schools where you have like in Texas, where you have these kids that have been learning the same offense they played in high school since they were 5 years old, it's a little bit different, and they have facilities that are nicer than this, and stadiums that seat 30,000 people, and $100 million facilities for a high school. It's just the resources over there are just ridiculous, So it's attractive, and like I said, the idea is in a way the whole purpose of Trench was, how do I create this college/pro experience and bring these resources to kids at an age that would never ever be able to experience this. I'll be selfishly, I always think I built Trench for me. I built it for my own 12-year-old self. I wanted to always be good. I always had dreams of playing at the next level, but I had no guidance and no resources and no understanding. I remember me and my buddies used to just go to the gas station and rip the workouts out of muscle magazines, and take those workouts to, our high school, which I don't think we had a single piece of equipment that was, not, made or developed in the 70s, and that's what we were using, and, rigging up old parachute harnesses to our trucks and pulling them around and doing just weird stuff that we thought we could do better, but we had no clue what we were doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of my fantasy of building this and my goal, and I think we've succeeded that. So
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's like you kind of mentioned, like a cultural thing. Like if you were to drop a facility like this in your hometown, I'm not familiar with your hometown specifically, but like that area, it would be hard to even keep the lights on because it's a cultural thing, and like the affordability of it, and it almost starts with like redefining the culture, and like that's an issue that honestly I feel like our platform bears a responsibility to do, is like get this information to these communities, have these types of conversations with people who are from the same background but have come and pursued these opportunities elsewhere. And like you said, you have hopes of bringing that back to your community. So like with just the general awareness and redefining the culture, like how do you think that culture can be redefined in these smaller, less exposed areas? You know what I mean?
I think I've always said, my business is a business that's built on relationships. And those relationships are developed one experience at a time. And I think the idea is expose them to the experience. We even do this with athletes we have here and now, because, we'll get these young athletes that come in at, 11 and 12 years old, and, we lay out a blueprint to their parent of, hey, this is not a 1 week camp. This is not a summer camp thing. This is literally going to be a lifestyle overhaul that we are asking you to make if you truly have the desire to get to where you want to go. Because these kids at 12 years old, they don't realize that, hey, listen, you're going to be 14 like that, very quickly. And then all of a sudden you're a freshman. And the reality is the ones that get a Division I scholarship in any sport are truly just the ones that develop the most between the ages of 10 and 18 years old, right? Mm-hmm. You could potentially have this, incredible potential to be great, but you just were a late bloomer. You underdeveloped because you started too late. And that is becoming more and more relevant the quicker and quicker we get there. So what we find with a lot of these kids is, we come out here and, we will tell them about the dedication that they need. And they're like, well, my son, he's only 11, he's only 12 years old. Like, that seems like a lot. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, come out here Saturday and come see our 11 and 12-year-olds, the ones that have been doing this since they were 8, right? And have your son jump in, right? And they do, and they're immediately humbled and baffled because they're like, wow, I had no idea how far behind we truly were. We've got to not only get them in this program, but we got to get them in this program and step on the gas, right?
Yep.
What I feel that, would be a phenomenal way for us to be able to get into some of these other towns is just come in there and do, a 5-on-5, with O lineman versus D lineman, right? Or bring in a camp or bring in a bus tour and bring some of our athletes over and, basically not go out there to, embarrass anybody, but let them know, hey, this is truly what the next level looks like. I'll never forget when I played my first All-Star game when I was in high school, and, I was actually exposed to kids from other states and realized really quickly, wow, I'm a big fish in a small pond. The talent out there is unlike anything I've ever seen. I was a 6'3", 16-year-old. I didn't realize I'd never felt so short in my entire life, And now I'm out here coaching these high school kids, and I'm the shortest one on the field,
Yeah.
and so it's just maximizing more and more. And so the problem is a lot of these kids, the hardest conversations we have with a lot of these parents is when, they come in, they're like, hey, we want our son has the dreams of playing, Power 5, he wants to do this, do this, do this. I'm like, okay, well, how many offers does he have right now? None. Okay. We do go through like a general eval, and we're like, well, he's got to get a lot faster. He's got to get a lot stronger. He's going to need to put on his position. He's going to need to put on about 35 pounds. And I'll be honest with you, he's probably 2 inches too short to really get a look by a Power 5 school. So we need to understand how to, adjust our expectations, and we can maybe get him to a Division II, or if he's really good, an FCS school, But, then I'll look at the kid and be like, so, what are you, ninth grade, 10th grade? And they're like, oh, no, he's going to be a senior. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't happen, but, and I'm not trying to be a dream crusher, but at the end of the day, we have to be realistic. And the idea is the earlier we get them started, honestly, the most important part of the process, you talked about culture, is it's so much easier to teach these kids a lifestyle when they're like that 9 to 12 years of age, right? I love it when, like, I have parents of, like, my 15-year-olds that have been in this program for so long, and their parents are like, wow, we were going on vacation this summer, and we literally had to choose what, hotel we were going to stay at based off of, like, which one was the closest to a real gym, because he wasn't going to miss a workout.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's us engraving a lifestyle into these kids of greatness that honestly, it goes so far beyond sports. And that's truly our main goal. If you actually go to our website, the first thing you'll see is our mission statement, which is instilling the ideas of discipline and dedication that lead to success in all aspects of life. It goes so far beyond just football or sports in general. It goes to teaching these kids how to live a successful lifestyle. And the reality is that we're going to always be the hardest workers in the room. We're always going to dedicate ourselves to our craft, and we're going to put our last name on everything we do. The way we do anything is the way we do everything. And so that's always been a huge part to us as coaches. And, always say, at the end of the day, trainer's job, nothing against trainers, but trainers are there to navigate you through reps and sets. A coach's job is there to motivate and educate, right? And that's what we do every day. We try to motivate these kids, and we try to educate them on not just, how the training process works, but what does it look like at the next level? And when you come here to a place like Trench, when you have with my staff, you got, 45, 50 years of professional football training experience on our staff working with these kids each and every day. You're going to literally be just fed this constant information of what that level looks like and develop these personalities on these athletes.
Yeah. And then one thing that I noticed on your guys' website, you have like a mandatory kind of introductory period where you won't even let a kid work out with like the rest of the group until they've kind of had these principles of, even like proper weight room etiquette and
Correct.
like proper mindset development. And that's all ingrained within your introductory process. So as you talk about the culture within this building specifically, how do you build that culture in that introductory period?
That's, it's actually, I came up with that process.
What's the official name of the process?
It's called the Ramp Up Program.
Yeah.
So the one thing that we are very upfront about is that a Trench membership is not something you can buy. You have to earn it. You have to come in. The only thing we will sell you on is either private sessions for position training, and we have some people that will come in and do that. We have kids that come all the way from, Fort Myers twice a week, making 2.5, 3 hour drives over here, Sarasota, Lake Mary, that come over here. And obviously they're not ones that can participate in the full program. So a lot of times we'll have them, and when they come over, we'll sign them up for private training for very specific work, right, that they can't get anywhere else, right? You're a defensive end, we're going to work on nothing but defensive end skills. But the reality is, if you want the entire elite or young dog program, depending on what age you are, we're going to cover your position-specific training. We're going to cover all your rehab and recovery. We're going to set you up with diet, supplement protocol. We're going to do all your speed training, all your weight training, full yoga, mobility. You name it, we're literally going to check every box on what it takes to make you a great ball player and really a great athlete. But the reality is that you have to have a certain mindset in order to do it. And then you also have to come into this program with a particular set of skills. And I will tell you, no one comes in with that particular set of skills. When I get my NFL combine guys down here, these are players from all over the country playing at major Power 5 schools, some of the best athletes in the entire country. They go through the ramp up before we actually start, because just because you've trained before doesn't mean you trained in trench before. And trench training is a whole different thing. So I probably started this process about 4 years ago where we created this ramp up. So the idea when someone comes in, before they ever get into a class or get the ability to sign up for the full membership, they have to start out in private sessions with a private coach. Generally it's 10 sessions, but we originally signed up for 10 because generally we can get them where they need to be in 10. I've had some athletes that honestly were very good athletes that had to take 50 before we allowed them to go into the group. But generally we try to get them through in 10. There's a very specific protocol we follow, and that is particularly in the weight room, because the reality is most of these kids never truly learn how to lift weights the right way. And even when you talk to like professional NFL players, I have these guys that come in after the first 3 days of training here, like, I've never looked at weightlifting this way before. I've always looked at it as, the goal is to come in and move weight. And if I can move weight, then I'll get bigger and stronger. And if I get bigger and stronger, then I'll, as a result, become a better football player. The problem with that is completely backwards to what we want to think about as an athlete. The reality is weightlifting is not about just getting bigger and stronger. It's about learning how to master movement patterns. And we have to learn how those movement patterns directly translate to what we're going to be doing on the field. So we have to understand, like when you do a walking lunge, how does that make you a better route runner, right? When we do a box squat, how is that going to make you fire off the line quicker? Right? When we do a bench press, how is that going to make you knock somebody off the line into your run fit? And so the idea is about learning how to control their body and truly activate their muscles. So we teach them the understandings of hypertrophy. We teach them the understandings of power. We teach them the understandings of explosiveness. We teach them how to load and fire fast twitch muscle fibers. We teach them, most people in general, if you just said, okay, while you're standing there, go ahead and flex your hamstring. They have no idea how to do it, right? It's like, well, if you don't know how to flex your hamstring, how are you going to use your hamstring when you run, right? We have to learn how to activate muscle before we ever learn how to train muscle. So the ramp-up process, I always say it's look at it as if they are going to school for weight training and learning how to take that weight training to functional movements on the field, right? And because if they can't weight train properly, you're never going to maximize your speed training. If you can't weight train properly, you're never going to maximize your position work, right? So once again, they have to learn this process. And the cool part about that process is I always feel like it's like killing 3 birds with 1 stone at this point, because we make it better on the new athlete. Because if you all of a sudden throw a brand new athlete, I don't care how skilled he is, you throw him into a group of 16-year-olds that have been trained with me for the last 3 years, they're going to be lost. They're going to be completely lost, and they're going to immediately feel, wow, I'm obviously the odd one out. I'm obviously weaker than everybody else. I have no idea what's going on. They're going to feel like a deer in the headlights the whole time. It's not a good experience, right? It's not a good experience for the other athletes, because the other athletes, what's that coach going to have to do? That coach is going to have to spend his entire day as he's coaching a group with that new athlete, teaching them everything. And they're like, wow, I'm not getting coached up anymore because he's always with the new guys, right? And I've been the guy that's been dedicated to this process for 3 years, right? So now I feel like I'm being neglected just because I'm more experienced. It shouldn't be that way. You always want to coach to your highest level of talent and your highest level of ability. And then thirdly, I don't want to put my coaches in that situation, right? My coaches need to understand that their job when they come in is to coach a group that has an original set of skills that is going to be able to maximize the efficiency of every class so that we can maximize results. Not, okay, I've got some guys that are over here, some guys are over here, so now I'm going to have to dumb this down for these guys. I shouldn't put my coaches in that situation. That's never doing your coaches justice. And that's one thing that I personally have really worked on for a long time here, and saying, hey, how can I maximize my coaching productivity? And me being a coach for as long as I have, I try to put all the coaching processes into the systems of how we actually do things here.
Yeah, for sure. And then I kind of want to talk a little bit about how you we touched upon it a little bit, like in the beginning, but like, how did you come up with this idea? I know you started in a different spot at D1 Tampa, and then you kind of decided that that you wanted to do something even more significant, even more impactful. How did that process go? How did you guys get into this facility? And how did you kind of align your vision with your action and kind of creating this particular spot, you know?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's, to make a long story short, I actually trained for NFL Combine with one of my mentors who is in the Strength and Conditioning Coach Hall of Fame. Still this day, almost like, I would say, like a hero of mine, a guy named Kurt Hester, who was, the director of sports science and head strength and conditioning coach at Tulane University. I believe he's at University of Houston now. And one of the most insightful, inspiring, insane guys I've ever worked with in my life. I've always like joked around saying, hey, I was a football player by trade, but a meathead at heart. I absolutely loved training. I was always obsessed with the process. And so when I got with my strength and conditioning coach in college, which was Henry Briscoe, who was another guy that, won 2 Samson Awards while he was in Division I. He's also a former professional bodybuilder as well as a Division I football player, knew all the ins and outs of all different types of training. And then I've traveled around the entire, North America training with some of the best guys in the world and just picking different pieces from them. And even if I train with somebody that I don't necessarily agree with their protocol, I'm never that guy that just kind of like writes somebody off. Because I'm like, listen, there's something to learn from everybody. One thing I hate about this industry is how guys get on social media and stuff like that and just start assing on everyone they can see. And it's like, listen, if you're somebody that has to, try to put other people down to bring them up, because let's be real, you don't fully understand their process. There might be something to it. Now, once you fully understand it, you might not necessarily agree with it. And like, there are plenty of guys out there that do combine training that, let me tell you, their protocols are very different than mine. But at the same time, if I'd really dig into it, I'll be like, I like that stretch. I'll steal that stretch. I'll do this. And that's the way I think more people need to act. And really, to me, I've learned that the top guys in the industry, and some of my colleagues, we're all like that. We like to share with each other, right? Everyone likes to learn. I always say, the moment in this industry as a coach you cease to learn is the moment you need to get out, right? Because now you're doing your athletes a disservice. The game is always changing. You need to always change, right? That's what I loved about training fighters for so long too, is it was like, man, mixed martial arts, God almighty, it changes constantly, right? And with different types of athletes getting in, different types of techniques, different types of things. And so you as a coach are constantly being challenged. The football has changed, God, so much since, back when I'm in, like now, I'm 6'3", 290 pounds. Used to have middle linebackers that were my size, right? Now nose guards are my size, right? It's just absolutely crazy how the game has developed. So that being said, I went on and I played my professional career, and I fell in love with the concept of D1, which was, you have this incredible facility, you're training elite athletes, but then you're also training young athletes the same way. And then obviously they did a lot of like boot camp and adult stuff and all that, which was, great. But at the end of the day, when they went through that process, the idea with what I saw them doing, I just really, really agreed with. And I was like, wow, this is an incredible piece to just kind of get my thoughts back. I really enjoyed the fact that I was looking at these kids getting something that I wish I would have always had. And that's kind of what left it. And I was like, and I saw somebody doing it. Will Bartholomew is the founder of D1. I respect him very, very much. I respect what he's done from a businessman standpoint. I respect everything he's done from a branding standpoint. And there's a lot I learned from him. So I remember I was up there and I played in the NFL for a little bit. And then I went and played in the CFL one of my years. And I used to always go back to Nashville at D1 and train with Kurt. And one year I called Kurt and I was like, hey man, what's going on? Like, where are we going? And he said, man, I'm actually down here in Tampa. I was like, Tampa? And I remember being up there in Toronto and it was, spitting snow and everything was crazy. And I was like, Tampa sounds cool for the off season. That'd be great. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm actually opening this new facility down here. I was like, oh, y'all are opening a new facility in Tampa? He's like, yeah. He goes, I'll tell you what. He's like, why don't you come down here and train with me? He's like, I'll be down here for a couple weeks. Train with me. We'll train. We'll get after it. And then maybe you can help us out down here, in your off season. And I was like, well, I'm still under contract and this stuff. But, when I was in the CFL, and I was never in a position where I was making millions of dollars, and I was financially savvy. I always try to save as much money as possible, and I always like to do something in my off season to prepare myself for life after football. And so, I was like, yeah, you know what? That'd be perfect. I can go down there and train myself. I can get after it. I can get away from all the distractions, and then I can also make some money on the side and get some more experience in the life after football. So I went down there and I just absolutely fell in love with it. I fell in love with training the athletes. I fell in love with training the kids, and I created a pretty heavy following because everywhere I was in playing pro football, everybody always knew, like, when it came to training, like damn, Taylor's crazy. You know what I mean? Like everything he does. So when people heard that, we're other NFL players and CFL players and stuff like that, we're like, damn, Taylor's down in Tampa training. We all want to go spend our off season down there with him training. So I kind of had a little bit of a following that came down there with me, and then quickly had an impact on that facility. We quickly became the fastest growing facility in the history of the company. Then we became the most profitable company facility in the history of the company. Then we became the biggest facility in the history of the company. And then so as I went through, and I would literally train there, do my thing, manage the facility, and then leave and go play, and then come back and do it again, and just try to always leave it in a way that was good for me to come back. And one year I had a devastating injury, and broke my hip and tore my rectus femoris off, and basically the only fix, very similar injury to what Bo Jackson had, and really the only fix was getting a hip replacement. And I wasn't about to do a hip replacement at 26 years old. So at that point I was like, you know what? I already know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going right back to D1 Tampa. I'm going to do what I love to do, and I'm going to start training guys up. Started doing that, and then I actually started working a lot with the corporate office. So I was spending a lot of time in Nashville at the corporate office, and became a regional director. Worked with them for a long time, and all that being said, we started out with about 4 facilities when I was first there, and went to about 40 in about 3 years. And one thing I saw is that the growth was incredible from a business standpoint. But from a product standpoint, in my mind, the growth was just too fast, right? There was a big learning curve when you went from like 8 facilities to 20, right? And what I found was that the hardest thing was quality, training quality, right? So I was kind of put in charge of that. And then when they went to a full franchising model, to be honest with you, at that point, there were not really many, other than at my facility, there were not many elite athletes training there. There weren't many like combine players training there. There weren't a lot of like super athletes that were like traveling from all over the country to go to a D1 to train. And the average demographic, or the biggest demographic, honestly, for a D1 at the time was like women between the ages of 35 and 48. So, and nothing against it, but in my mind, it started feeling a little bit more like an athletic style Orange Theory. And then I also looked at the way they were training, the kids. And when, and it really was just kind of like watered down strength and conditioning, or really not even strength and conditioning, more watered down conditioning and agility, right? Because you would have, a 13-year-old, volleyball player training right next to a 15-year-old football player training right next to, a 9-year-old soccer player. And I'm like, let's be real. If we're trying to create next level athletes, this is not the way we're going to do it, right? I mean, we've got to become extremely specific on everything that we're doing. And I would never in my life sit there and train, a 13-year-old volleyball girl the same way I'm training this, 5-star defensive end. It's not going to happen. So, I actually, before I had even left D1, I created the Trench program. The Trench program originally started out as nothing but offensive line, defensive line skills, which is actually the reason why we're called the Trench Academy. If you actually look at our logo, we have the 4 stars on top and we have the 5 stars on the bottom. So that represents a defensive front and an offensive front, right?
There you go. I like that.
And so obviously, and we always have stuck with like the military theme, because obviously the trench is the military theme that was given to, and kind of was embraced by the football aspect of the guys that, train and fight and play in the trenches. So we created a brand specifically for linemen, and then honestly, we started getting inquiries from all other positions, because we were also doing their weight training, their nutrition, and things like that. And people started seeing, after our first year, I think we had 41 kids sign Division I scholarships. And we had, parents all of a sudden started calling with, linebackers, DBs, wide receivers. And they're like, hey, I know you guys just do linemen, but I saw what you did with so-and-so's body. Like, my son has to put on 30 pounds. Like, this kid got so much faster. He completely transformed in your program. And so I was like, well, crap, if we're going to go into doing other position groups, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it, so I went out and found, the best wide receiver coach. I went out and found the best DB coach. I went out and found the best linebacker coach. And I found, 2 other D-line coaches to help me with all my D-linemen I had. I had the best offensive line coach in the country down here. I've got an incredible running back coach, incredible tight end coach. So, now we literally service all positions, and everything we do is position specific from everything we do from the standpoint on the field. We're developing these guys as football players as a whole, but we're always having their position group in mind. And no one else in the country is really doing this. And this is where we really have separated ourselves, and it's a really, really cool process. And so that started having so much success, and I kind of fell, like I said, I literally just felt with me and D1 that we were going right and D1 was veering left. And at this point, it was just kind of becoming brand confusion. Because, of course, as a corporate office that, has now got, 50 facilities, and they're running like, corporate specials and splashing this stuff out on social media. And it's like, hey, sign up and get your first month for $100, or, a 1 month no contract. And then they come over to D1, our facility, and be like, hey, so I got this thing on Instagram. And we're like, yeah, we don't do any of that. Everything we do is 1 year contract. It's, $750 to do your ramp up, and it's $500 a month. And then we're like, okay, so I think we're running a completely different company at this point. So there was no bad blood. As a matter of fact, I still respect them and everything they're doing. I still love what they're doing from a business standpoint. That I think the one thing they've done that I really have tried to learn from so much is marketing and branding, and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say that, the trench was something that I wanted to follow that was purely my passion. I didn't have a massive passion for adult boot camp classes, right? I had a massive passion for taking kids that wanted to work as hard as humanly possible and get to the highest level possible. That's what I wanted to do. So
yeah, for sure. And then I kind of want to talk about an athlete in general. What do you think defines great athletes from just good athletes, or let's say great athletes from talented athletes?
So the biggest thing is, talent will always carry you, and it's. But I'll tell you the one thing is, we are probably the hardest on our most talented athletes here, because the reality is, being really talented is a gift, but like any gift, it can make you lazy, right? Just like if you're really, really smart, right? You're really, really smart in high school, and you're smart enough to get into Harvard. But then when you get into Harvard, and everyone's smart, and you never actually learn how to study, you never actually learn how to work your reports, you never really learned how to hone your craft, you've never really been challenged, that's when these kids panic, right? And a lot of them have nervous breakdowns because they get to the point they're like, what? They're completely out of their comfort zone. We are the same with athletes, right? In the fact that we're probably the hardest on our most talented athletes, because being talented can make you lazy, right? And you can get away easily with bad habits. And so a lot of times we'll be doing film study. Like, I'll be doing film study with some of my defensive ends that are, 3-star, 4-star kids, whatever it is. And I will start chewing them out on a play, and they're like, but coach, I had a sack for an 8-yard loss. And I'm like, yeah, but you tell me what this move was right here. And then y'all see it, and it's like a really, piss poor move. And I was like, that was not you winning. That was him losing. It's like, you're going to be at University of Clemson next year. You think that shit's going to work when you play Boston College? No way. You know what I mean? You think that's going to work against a Virginia Tech 5-year senior? No way. You know what I mean? So we're coaching them at a higher level than where they're at right now. So as far as the difference between what makes a truly great athlete versus a talented athlete is the discipline and dedication aspect to it. It is the ones that truly always want to get better, not the ones that, the ones that come in and they check their ego at the door. You know what I mean? And that, to me, is the ones that you can work with the most, the ones that want to be coached, the best athletes I've ever met in my life. I mean, I've trained guys that have come in here that, are 13-year NFL veterans, and they're training with me for the first time. And you would think that they were college freshmen with how receptive they are to everything, constantly asking questions, constantly wanting to learn, constantly wanting to get better, and after the workout, if they felt like they struggled with something, just start texting me questions after the workout, like, Coach, like, tomorrow when we do this, like, what can I work on tonight to get better? And it's like, wow, you are somebody that's so dedicated to your craft versus some athletes that can't. They might come in and do something new that all of a sudden they're not good at, and they'll be like, this is bullshit. This is not. I'm like, well, is it bullshit or is your execution bullshit, right? At the end of the, are you afraid to get yourself out of your comfort zone? Because the reality is that's the only way we're going to grow, right? I always say, the coolest thing about the weight room specifically is it directs so much towards life. And this is something that we train our kids from an early age, is that the best thing about the weight room is that the only way you see growth is through failure. I was like, you cannot grow without pushing yourself to failure. And then the moment you accomplish something, like, okay, I just got to a new PR, well, guess what? Now we're going to work out at that percentage, and I'm going to push you to failure through with these working loads and these working maxes, and that's going to get you to a new one and a new one. But at the end of the day, if you get to the point to where you train until you get a 315-pound bench press, and then you never push yourself beyond that, not only will you cease to get stronger, but you'll actually start getting weaker, right? And I feel like that's the place that a lot of athletes find themselves in. A lot of athletes get to the point where you're like, oh, this is good enough, right? And this is where I'm at. The great ones are the ones that obviously have great God-given talent, but are truly never satisfied with their performance, right? And to be honest with you, I felt like I was always kind of that guy, except for I didn't have as much talent as I wish I did. But at the same time, like, those guys are the ones that you also have to manage a little bit more mentally, because you've got to be like, listen, man, you've got to be easier on yourself sometimes, right? But I would rather have that kid that I got to pull back, or that athlete I've got to pull back a little bit, versus the one I always have to push forward, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would say that's the biggest character trait, is them finding that discipline and that dedication to where, the number one person they're trying to beat every day is the man in the mirror, right? So I think that's a big point, and we instill that into our guys. I tell all of our athletes all the time, right now I have a college prep group. We train every single day at 4:00. They're the first group of the day, because these are all my high school seniors that, for whatever reason, didn't go up early. So they're all going to be reporting in May or June. And these are the guys, and the reason why we go at 4:00 is because these guys don't have any pressing workouts or anything like that after school. They're essentially done with high school stuff. So I've got about 30 guys in that group that are all going Division I. And these are the kids that I remember they have a lot more dedication than I did, because I can tell you, I think my spring semester, my senior year, after I had already signed my Division I national letter of intent to go play, I think I probably had 130 cumulative absences in classes. I don't think I was doing anything. I think I was just hanging out, going to my buddy's pool every day at noon, just enjoying my last hurrah of high school. These kids, they're not just trying to get to college, they're trying to dominate when they get there, right? And the reason why is because I tell them all the time, I was like, do not be that kid that the highlight of your college career was signing day. Because right now with the portal and everything like that, these kids get there and they can so quickly dissolve into the ether, right? It's like, well, man, I was a 5-star last year. Yeah, nobody cares this year, right? So is everybody else. That's why they're all here, right? So, that's one thing that I push. I'm just beyond proud of that group, because if there's one group that obviously has accomplished a lot that could very clearly and very easily go and be like, you know what, I'm just going to hit cruise control, it would be that group, right? But they don't, because they're looking to the next goal now, right? So, yeah, that's kind of the culture and mentality we have here.
Yeah. And then we talked a little bit before the podcast even started about NIL a little bit and how athletes are getting paid. Do you find that to have a negative impact on the mindset that athletes have in terms of pushing themselves forward? Because 5 years ago, you're only kind of, I don't know how to phrase it, but like your credibility and your achievements were only driven by your performance on the field, as opposed to today where it's like, how marketable are you? How big is your social media presence? And they're rewarded monetarily, so they're not getting that reward from their performance. How do you find that to be modifying their mentality and,
Well, I'll tell you this to start, because I have some opinions on this, but I'll tell you this to start. I 100% agree that all student athletes need to be getting paid based off of what they're doing. For instance, on the he's a friend of mine. He was actually a partner of mine when we were at D1 in Tampa. We trained together for NFL Combine prep, but on the wall, I've got his jersey there as Tim Tebow, right? There was no more marketed athlete in the history of college football than Tim Tebow. If Tim Tebow would have been able to make NIL money back when he played, just managing his NIL probably would have been a Fortune 500 company. And so the amount of money that he made for that university, should have been the amount of money, like his portion of that should have been able to feed his great grandkids. So I believe wholeheartedly that these athletes need to be getting paid, because I've known a lot of athletes that through injuries and things like that, they gave their best years to college. And if these guys can't go pro right away, which I'm not saying that these guys are ever going to be good enough to go pro right away, but if they can't go pro right away, then they need to be getting paid while they're still technically an amateur, playing in college football. But as far as the mentality goes, that's twofold. I definitely don't think that it has lessened these athletes' hunger. I think it's increased it more, especially with these athletes that I know that can now see, holy crap, I am 15 and I can truly change my family's life in 2 years, right? So they're looking at that picture. And then at the same time, what also happened in conjunction with the NIL was the portal, right? And so now 65% of all new scholarships are going to portal kids, not high school kids. So these guys are driven by the incentive, right, of, hey, I can go get paid now. But they're also driven by the fear of, hey, I've only got 35% of the contracts that I get to work with, right? So, more of us can get paid, but few of us are going to go, right? And so I believe that's been a positive effect. I have not seen any effort or focus or anything driven off. I still think the kids are still driven by the fact that they want to wear, University of Oklahoma's jersey. They want to go to the University of Oregon. Like, they're still focused on that standpoint. I do not like the way the NIL is the Wild West right now. I think that's chaotic. I don't like the fact that the ones that get paid the most are not necessarily the best players. They're the most marketable, right? At the end of the day, you could have the absolute best player on your team could be the left guard. Like, he's almost going to be a guaranteed first-round pick, but he's never going to make as much money as a starting running back, right? And the only reason why the starting running back is any good is because of him, right? And I believe that can easily create animosity in the locker room. You basically, and with the portal and with NIL, you basically have turned every single college athlete into a free agent. Every single year, I think it makes it damn near impossible for smaller schools to compete. I've always, I haven't seen the mentality of the athlete change. I've certainly not seen these athletes become less driven. If anything, they're more driven. But at the same time, I do believe that it should be done differently. I don't like the idea of just handing a 17-year-old $1 million with zero guidance and say, hey, good luck, right? Especially some of these kids where, probably, 80% of them are coming from impoverished areas. Like that's to me, that's not a smart design for any system, right? I would love to see it set up, honestly, where there was an equal portion of NCAA money put aside into major escrow accounts. These guys can still make independent money on their likeness, but I'm talking off of merchandise, I'm talking off of ticket sales, I'm talking off of all the money that is being brought in by the university through the athletic program, the football program. And that's all being evenly divided and split up, honestly, putting it aside almost into like some sort of escrow account. And that escrow account is set up upon graduation. These guys can now be like, I guess you could say, they now can qualify for it like retirement. So instead of paying a kid, $3 million over the course of his 5 years at the university, say, hey, we're just going to pay you $80,000 a year for the rest of your life, right? We're going to give you a head start. We're going to give you free college tuition. You're going to leave with a degree, right? And you are going to get an $80,000 a year head start. So imagine if all these kids that, let's say if they went and tried it in the NFL and it didn't work out, they knew that they were still going to be in a situation where they had their college degree, they had no debt to their name whatsoever, and they're making $80,000 a year. I mean, they're so far ahead. I mean, like 80% of Americans will never be in that position, right? Yeah. So, I mean, what a great place to start. And then processes through the university of teaching them how to manage that money, to me, the same exact problems you see in the NFL, you're going to see in college where, these kids, have made a net income of, $7 million, but then somehow still come out of it, $1.5 million in debt and with nothing, Yeah. And that'd be just such a shame. So, at the end of the day, it's still really early. I think everyone could agree that the regulation on it needs to be in a way, but I just kind of wish it was broken up to where it was a little bit more fairness across the board. And at the same time, we weren't just giving kids money, we were teaching them how to build wealth. That to me is something big, because I can tell you, I was able to build wealth, through my pro career, and obviously now into my professional, work life. But I never made a ton of money playing football. I just managed it well. And so I think and it allowed me to do things that made me blessed and gave me a head start. And that's what I feel like most of these kids just need. They just need a head start. And I think they deserve one with as much as they've given to the university, right? People don't realize like the amount of work and effort in it. I mean, there's so many people that are like, oh, other people have to, pay their tuition and, they have to get a job. And I'm like, you clearly have never been through 2 days, right? This is more than a full-time. These guys wake up every day and go to a labor camp. It's brutal, and they're being evaluated every day. Imagine every single day you went to your job, you could get fired based off of your daily performance. And that's what these guys go through mentally and physically. So, of course they need to be compensated for it. So, but I haven't seen it adjust their I guess desire or effort. I haven't seen anyone get paid and lay back, because at the end of the day, I think it keeps them hungry.
Yeah. And then that kind of speaks to something that we talked about before. What you guys run on Sundays is you guys have kind of mentor leaders come in and talk to these young athletes about how to manage these, especially in the NIL space, these problems and obstacles that they're going to have to overcome. Could you talk about what that is that you guys run on Sundays a few times a month?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we run it usually once a month. We have our mentorship program where when these kids first come in, they're given, once they make it through their ramp up protocol, they're given what we call our trench playbook. And the trench playbook is literally a book that outlines their entire year, everything we're doing that year, everything they're committing to. We help them make their goals, right? We have short-term and long-term goals, right? We use the SMART system, which many people know. And we help these guys level out their goals. And then once they get into those goals, we want to help give them a mentor to keep them on track with those goals. And so when we do with that system is, we'll bring in, obviously, we have our breakout sessions with their individual coaches, where a lot of times the biggest blessing that these kids have is an opportunity to open up to somebody, right? I always say, sometimes the hardest person in the world to deal with can be a 15, 16-year-old kid, right? But then, we talk as coaches all the time. We're like, man, you never know what that 15 and 16-year-old kid's going through, right? So we have to meet them at their level, right? We remember what it was like to be that age. And, whether, his girlfriend broke up with him, or his mom and dad are going through a divorce, or, whether he had a death in the family, or whether, he's struggling with mental health, whatever it might be. And so we want to be an outlet for that. So we're honest with that, and I think it's good for these guys to have, masculine mentors that can open up and talk about their true experiences. We've had a lot of, and I'll tell you, every time we do that, the best thing is I've never paid a speaker to come speak to these guys. A lot of the speakers that have come speak to them are NFL guys that train here. And every single time I mention it to one of my NFL guys about, hey, would you mind coming out on Sunday and speaking to these guys for an hour or so? They always jump at the opportunity because they're like, man, I wish somebody would have done it for me, right? And, man, I can tell you, we have had some major conversations with these kids that is unlike anything. Like I've seen NFL players open up about their personal life to these kids, stuff that you would never see on ESPN, stuff that you would never see. I mean, I honestly sometimes, and I don't ever really tell the NFL guys what to talk about. I'm just like, what would you like to tell these young men? And they're like, I've even had some NFL guys like, you really want me to tell them? I'm like, yes, I really want you to tell them. So, sometimes we dismiss the parents, and the NFL guys like, I'm going to be real with you. This is the way life is, right? And it's incredible to hear the stories. But yeah, I mean, I think about with NFL, I'll never forget. I don't even think this was during one of those events, but I remember Will Golson, who's a very good friend of mine, and he's been an athlete here for a long time, and he's such a big part of what we've done here at Trench. And he was talking to one of our athletes as a very good player that had landed an NIL deal, and he was like, "Listen, man." He goes, if somebody would have given me that kind of money when I was 17, 18 years old, he's like, I never would have made it 12 years in the NFL. And it was just kind of letting him know. It's like, listen, man, for him and his mindset, someone gives me $200,000, well, it might as well have been $200 million. I probably would have gone off and done something ridiculous, And so the fact that sometimes these kids can hear that is to be like, listen, man, it's not about the short term here. It's about what you can do in the long term. But then at the same time, if you do get the amazing blessing or opportunity to get that kind of money, how do we use that money to leverage to where it just starts building you wealth already, right? But at the same time, how do we make sure that it doesn't become a distraction that, takes away from the ultimate goal of where you're trying to go, right? So, but no, that the Sundays has been so big for us. It lets us get to know these athletes on a whole different level. And it's like a devotional. We talk to these kids about their spiritual life. We talk to them about everything they're going through. And it's such a big outlet because, sometimes in sports or especially football, it can be such this hardcore, tough guy, masculine spot. But man, I can't tell you how many guys I know that struggle big time with mental health. They struggle big time with what they've got going on. And it's hard when you play a sport when, you're only as good as you were yesterday, and you're only valued for what you did yesterday, right? And so sometimes they need guys just to lean on a little bit. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that, like kind of to touch upon what you just said, is mental health is definitely neglected in sports. I think men's sports is definitely neglected just in general. But I think that's the mind and body is that completes the game. And I think it's really positive that you guys focus on the mental health side of things because, I mean, if your mind's not where it needs to be, your actions aren't following. Your actions will follow where your mind is. So if your mind's off somewhere else and you're really concerned with a lot of the other things that are weighing you down in life and you have no outlet to talk about that, and even to see an NFL guy who all these guys, I mean, if you're here, you're spending the money, you're spending your time, you're spending your energy, exerting yourself. That's where you want to be. To hear somebody who's in the position that you want to be in talk about the experiences that you feel so lonely kind of going through, to hear them talk about that in their own situations, seemingly like seeing them on TV be so successful and think that their lives are perfect. It's
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%. Like, I tell you what we've tried to build here through even the way we design our facility, like this private area here we have in the back, this beautiful spot. And if you go to like our physical therapy, like the last thing I wanted my physical therapy to feel like was a medical clinic. Like, as funny as it sounds, I always wanted my NFL guys to feel like it's a place where you could go. It's more of a player's lounge than, a physical therapy, right? Obviously we have all the bells and whistles there, but at the same time, it kind of becomes like the daily commune for these guys. We have the players' lounge for these guys over here. And, what we've tried to do with this facility and the culture and our coaches is make this place a safe haven for these athletes, where this is literally their home away from home. And for some of these athletes, this is their home. And our athletes in our high school elite program is a 3-day-a-week program. It's interesting how I find so many of these guys still come up here 5-6 days a week. A lot of times I'll come up there and be like, hey, you training with so-and-so today? And like, no, just hanging. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, what a better place to be than up here just kind of like, getting some extra film study, right? Or jumping into physical therapy and getting in the Normatex and getting cryo and getting infrared sauna, like, rather than being out there getting into God knows what, right? And these guys, the reason why is because they want to be here, because they want to be around our coaches that they know truly care about them. And then they also want to be around other people that are like-minded, trying to do what they want to do, right? I just got done telling somebody today, I was like, put yourself on your high school team again, right? There was probably 10% of the guys on your high school team that were really trying to make it, right? Really trying to make it somewhere. And then there was probably only about another 30% that were really trying to win. Like, I'm doing everything it takes to win. And then the other 60%, you got 10, 30, and then the other 60, most of them were just kind of happy to be on the team, right? And a lot of these, if you're one of those 10% people, you're going to get frustrated with everyone else. Well, we have nothing but the 10% here, right? Because this program is too hard to not be a 10%. If you're not a 10% guy, you're not going to make it here. Like, you're going to fall out real quick. We're too demanding. It's too hard. It's too taxing. We ask too much out of you. But at the same time, like, our guys always say, like, the same way, people take pride in being in the military, or people take pride in being this. It's like a brotherhood, And we've wanted to create this place as a safe haven. I can't tell you, like, I've had so many over the years. I mean, countless testimonials from parents about, like, you guys, y'all got 4/10 off my kid's 40 in 6 months. You got, my kid put on 45 pounds of muscle in one off season. He came in and his vertical jump was a 25. Now he's jumping a 35. Like, just unbelievable, physical testimonies. But I'll be real, that's probably about 30% of the positive testimonials. The other 70% are like what you guys have done for my son mentally, which you guys, like, how you guys have really helped mold and change his, his outlook on life, the amount of discipline, dedication, and, like, the most important thing I think for these young men is confidence. Teaching them how to build confidence. And I tell people all the time, yes, you will have some kids that naturally, I have 4 sons myself, right? Like, I have 2 of them that are a little bit more introvert, and then I have 2 of them that would go up and talk to anybody. Like, they would, I mean, they're like the most bubbly, goofy, crazy class clown kids, right? And their personalities are all so different. And at the end of the day, yes, some kids are just going to be naturally more confident than other kids. But the reality is, confidence is something that can be built in anyone, right? Doesn't matter what your age. And I always say, but confidence is driven through preparation. And preparation is built through repetition. And through repetition, you prepare. And through preparation, you build confidence. So I tell these parents and players all the time, I was like, how many of you guys have ever taken a test where you went in and you studied really hard for that test, and you got 5 questions into that test, and you, like, breezed through the first 5? And it's a 40-question test, right? how did you feel after those first 5? And they're like, oh, great, I'm going to nail this. Like, I didn't even have to read the whole question. I already knew the answer. Great. How many of you guys ever take a test that you went in that day and you didn't know there was a test that day? And how'd you feel after those 5 questions? And they're like, oh, man, like, I wanted to run out of the room. I tell these parents, that's the way a lot of your kids feel on the football field right now. It's not that they don't like the sport, it's that they don't have a clue what they're doing. And I've called out coaches for this all the time because I've spoken at a lot of coaching seminars and things like that. And the number one thing I hear coaches, especially high school coaches, bitch about is effort. Like effort and aggression. Like I don't get these kids nowadays. Like they don't care about anything. They're always in their phones. Like they don't hit like the way we used to hit. They don't do. I'm like, so what happens is sometimes I'll hear these coaches just ripping into their players, and then I'll go up to their players and I'll be like, all right, I'll walk up to like their defensive line. I'll be like, all right, listen. So what handed stance do you need to be in, or what foot do you need to have back? Because right now you're going to slant to the A gap out of the 3 technique. So when you get down your 3-point stance, what hand do you need to have down in order to slant to the A gap, and what foot do you need to make sure you have back? They will go to me like, what's a 3 tech? And I'm like, okay, so here's the problem. They're confused. They're not lazy. They just don't know what's going on, right? I was like, and I'll go to the coach and I'll be like, what if I hired you to be my electrician and you had never done any electrician work? And then I left and came back and you hadn't gotten anything done. And then I screamed at you about your effort. That wouldn't be fair.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're doing, right? You guys, a lot of times, are putting these kids in this exact same situation. Like you're not teaching them the baseline fundamentals. I've coached a Pop Warner team that won the National Super Bowl one time, and I think on offense we had 3 plays. That's it. I mean, it was literally like play 1, play 2, play 3. That's all we taught them. Some of these coaches go out there and they teach them they try to teach like the most elaborate playbook, and I'm like, no, just teach them how to block and tackle. Like teach them the fundamentals of the game, right? Sure. And teach them the basics first. But a lot of these kids come into it, they don't know the basics. And so they're left without this enormous precursor. That's why we have the ramp up, right? Before we all of a sudden start power cleaning, right? You can't power clean without understanding a pull. You can't power clean without understanding how to hinge. You can't power clean without understanding the movement of triple extension. Right? We can't all of a sudden throw 225 pounds on a barbell unless we start out with a PVC pipe, right? Yeah. And that's the way it is. And that's what's funny is like a lot of people are always like, man, you get these kids lifting so young. I'm like, well, yeah. I was like, it doesn't mean I'm coming in and throwing, 300 pounds on their back and saying, all right, first day, let's see what happens. The crazy thing is I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of these kids that go to their high school weight room for the first time and they'll be like, all right, how many of you guys have ever lifted? A bunch of freshmen, like 2 out of 40 raise their hand. Like, all right, well, first thing we need to do is find out how strong you are. Let's max. So, okay. Like, I mean, it's like we should train these kids for 6 months before we even think about overloading them, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the biggest things I think is probably the biggest misconception about training, period. With these young kids is, a lot of people think that, we don't really want them lifting weights until he's, 13, 14 years old. I'm like, there's not some sort of weightlifting bar mitzvah that happens on their 14th birthday that just allows them to start lifting, right? The reality is by the time they're 13, 14 years old, they should be able to lift at a very high level. Just like when they're 16, they should be able to drive at a very high level. But that doesn't mean when they're 16, that's the first time they start driving, right? Yeah. They start driving when they're 13, 14. They learn how to do it the right way so that you're confident when they go do it on their own, they'll be safe and they'll understand the rules of the road, right? When we first come in, like literally when we start that ramp up process with a kid as early as the age of 9, first thing we do is teach them how to unrack the weight and put the weight back up safely, right? Mm-hmm. This is how you manage a weight room, right? Things can happen, right? We have to be aware. We have to understand how to respect the weight room and how to use these tools. Because at the end of the day, that's all the weights are, is tools that we use to grow. So anyway, man, like that's I know I kind of went on a little tangent there, but at the same time, we have a very big passion for teaching these guys the things the right way. And we have a big passion for, I guess I would just say this. What I have found over the, 12 years of doing this is that I don't think most coaches give these kids enough credit of what they're truly capable of understanding. Like, it's almost like they don't want to teach them stuff because, number one, which is scary, either they don't know, which I find that a lot, or number two, they feel like the kids are not intellectually capable of understanding. And I'm like, man, these kids can learn more than you and I can, right? I mean, their brains are like sponges, right? You'd be amazed at what you can teach these kids how to do, right? But you have to get them to buy in, right? They're not going to buy in if you ever use the words "because I told you so," right?
Yeah.
Oh, that didn't mean anything to them. Well, teach them why. Why is this even important, right? I always say to an athlete, if you're talking to your coach and the coach can't answer the word "why" 3 times in a row, then you probably need to question what they're coaching, right?
Yeah.
Because they should always be able to tell you why this is important, right? So that's kind of where we're at.
A quote that I like is, "A strong enough why can justify any how," right? So
Right.
if you understand why you're, like you mentioned earlier, why you're doing lunges, why you're doing cleans,
Right.
and how that translates, like you're going to be willing to put forth a greater effort and greater intensity into these workouts because you understand how it's helping you
Right.
personally. You're not just doing it because you told them so or anything like that.
Right.
So I think that's definitely really important, and not even just in the weight room or in football, but just in life anyway. Like if you have a boss who's like, "Do this," and we'll figure it out later. Like just make sure this gets done.
Right.
You're not gonna be like putting that effort forward.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, the most important part of the process is teaching them everything that's going on around me. Like what's ultimately, let's start at what is the end game? What am I trying to do? Okay, well, like we talked about before. Okay, I'm playing a 3 technique and I'm slanting to the A gap. Cool. So I need to know that I've got to be able to cross face the guard, right? And I've got to be able to get into the A gap. And as soon as I slant, now that is my gap integrity. I've got to play with that gap responsibility. So then you can't, and that's usually where most of it stops. It's like, okay, I need you to go from here to here. But then they don't teach them what that first angle step needs to look like, where their eyes go when they come off the football, what is their target point, blah, blah, blah. So you need to teach them those little details, and then you explain to them why these are important, because in the course of the game, believe it or not, those X's and O's, when the ball snaps, they actually move, and they actually go places, and they actually hit, and they do things, and they fall down, and they they dive at your knees. And so we have to teach them how to do all this stuff. Like, we can't just write it up on a board and expect them to be able to go execute. No, we have to teach them the fundamentals of how they physically execute. And that's why I always say, it's like, man, one of the best things you got to be able to do before you start teaching them any plays, how do you block, how do you tackle, right? Well, and before you even teach them how to block, how to tackle, how do you get in an athletic stance? How do you understand how to bring your hips? How do you understand how to change direction off your outside foot? These are all the things that even with our NFL guys, we never get away from. We're always coaching the basics, right? Because there are things that are easy to fall off of, right? So, but yeah.
Yeah. Something that I find interesting is that you have a lot of guys in here who compete against each other like during the season and come from very different backgrounds. And I'm sure there's a little bit of competition. Do you find that to like elevate the intensity in this room? Because, like, let's say you have 2 teams who just played each other in a conference championship last year. And like, how did you see them kind of group up together, like team by team, and like push each other, or, like some smack talk going back and forth?
Yeah.
Or
It definitely is that. A lot of the guys, they end up coming in. We have, tons and tons of it's actually really fun too when we go in-season protocol, right? So when we go in-season protocol, we literally will see about 200 varsity athletes from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock on a Thursday to come in for pregame treatment therapy, right? So they get an hour and a half of cryotherapy, infrared sauna, normatec compression treatment, blood flow restriction, ART work, PNF stretch, dry needling, acupuncture, cupping, Graston. They do a yoga salutation, they do band work, and then they do an ice bath. So we got them for about an hour and a half of just making sure that when they wake up on Friday morning, they feel incredible. And the funny thing is, a lot of times, like, you can have one local high school defensive line that comes in and they're doing film study with me, and I'm studying film of who they're playing, and then Coach Ray, my offensive line coach, has got the other team's offensive line. So like, we're literally like in opposite film rooms, like talking shit to each other, you know what I mean? Like having fun, but so that there is definitely a competitive nature to it, always. But the funny thing is what I've found is that once these kids have been entrenched outside of football and outside of school, they hang out more with trench kids than they do kids at their own high school. Because like I said, all of them are these like-minded guys, right? Because it's like, well, we compete against each other, and we're all trying to win a state championship or conference championship or whatever it is. And so, hey, when the lights come on, I'm going to try to kill you. But at the same time, I'm still going to see you tomorrow. And I know that you and I will probably both be at the All-Star game, by the end of this season. We'll all be this. Who knows? We could even be playing at the same college together. You're offered by UCF. I'm offered by UCF. We're going to go on our visit together there, right? And it creates this really, really, really tight culture. And, it's a blast. I absolutely love that part. That's probably one of the funnest things. And, I'm going to literally, I'll go and Coach Ray is my offensive line coach. And, I obviously work with a lot of the D-line linebackers. So, but, and we do the exact same thing with the wide receiver coach and the DB coach and stuff like that. But, I'll walk by, like if I've got, 3 different D linemen for this one school and we're playing this other O-line, I'll walk to, one of our offensive linemen that's been a member here for, 2 years. And I'll just be like, hey, I got something for you this week. You know what I mean? Like just, and me and Coach Ray will even be talking crap to each other. It's fun. But the cool thing is these kids learn how to compete. One of the things that we do right now is we have the Trench Academy, or Position Academy. So we do once a week, we do big groups of all of our DBs, all of our wide receivers, all of our O-line, all of our D-line. We all come together and we do like 45 minutes of film study. After 45 minutes of film study, we'll do about 45 minutes of endo, and then we do 45 minutes of one-on-one competition. And we literally, imagine with offensive line, defensive line, we do one-on-one competition every single week, year-round. We never stop. When these kids go to showcases and combines and things like that, they're trying to get college recognition, all those coaches really care about is how they look like in one-on-ones. Our kids are never going to be surprised by it because we literally do it every single week. When these guys go like the big Under Armour camp or the Nike Spark or the Open or the Invitation or whatever it might be, it's just another day at the office for them because we do it all the time. And so you can come out here at Trench every single Tuesday night and you can see 4 stars going against 4 stars all the time. And they go against each other constantly. They go against each other so much that they're getting to the point now where they're learning, okay, this kid's really good at this kid's really good at that, and so I'm going to attack them differently. So they're learning the strategy. I always say at the end of the day, we want all our athletes playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers. And so that has become a huge part of our essence is teaching these kids how to compete it the right way. Because at the end of the day, lifting weights is awesome, being fast is awesome, having great agility is awesome. But at the end of the day, if we don't know how to translate it to a way that actually opens up on the field and brings up our performance, what are we doing?
Yeah. And then do you find any coaches to be non-receptive to your training programs and find it to I don't know whether it would be an insult to their ego as a coach to have some of their players? Because personally, my junior year, I wanted to go play Division I, and it was I know I should have gone into private training early, but my coach kept on pulling us back in.
Right.
He's trust in this program. We want you in the locker room. We want you in the weight room, mentoring our younger guys. And then my junior year, I went up to a private training facility who had results-driven program. They sent guys to go play at Notre Dame, sent guys to go play at big Power 5 schools. And I had my teammates kind of see me as a traitor, or my coaches see me as they didn't give me the captain spot because I wasn't in the weight room with them. But the way that I saw it is I'm trying to, number one, put myself in the best position to be successful. And through that, I'm putting my team in the best position to be successful. And then I'm also gaining knowledge and experience that I can give to my teammates. But I don't know if that's maybe a small town Massachusetts mindset.
No. That's everywhere. That's everywhere. And we certainly deal with that. And I can tell you the one thing is that we've been able to successfully do over the years. The good thing is we've been around for a while. And at this point, we've had 270 kids sign Division I scholarships out of our program. And obviously those 270 kids have gone off and they all play high school ball. And a lot of them go to specific schools and play. And it's gotten to a point now where the coaches are damn, you guys are making our job pretty easy. These kids are monsters, you know what I mean? And, you guys are helping us win state championships and things like that. but it was not always like that. And we still have coaches that do give us a lot of pushback. Now, the one thing is a lot of it comes down to our athlete first. We tell our athletes, number one, you do trench in addition to, not in lieu of, right? We still want you at every high school workout. We still want you at every high school meeting, every high school event. We want you to own that leadership role. We want you to be a huge part of what we're doing with that team. We want you to constantly make sure that you are focused and that you are completely energetic in doing everything and then some of what it means to be a leader on that team. But the reality is we have to understand that when we're talking about developing ourselves as an individual, we can't get better than everyone else just doing what everyone else is doing, right? Everyone else in the country is working on, off-season programs at high school. Everyone else in the country is going to two-a-days. Everyone else in the country is going to practice. The reality is like when you look at the NFL, they all have mandated work as well, right? They have them X amount of time, X amount of the day. But at the same time, like they all still, in their free time, come see a specialist like myself. Because here's the reality. At this point, most coaches going from high school to college to the NFL are no longer trying to develop talent. And I tell this to parents all the time. It is not your coach's job in high school or in college to develop your son to a great ball player. It is your coach's job to evaluate the talent and recruit the talent, right? And their job is they recruit talent, and once they have their talent there, they have to evaluate it, and they're going to put the best players on the field that it takes for them to win. If your son is not one of those players, don't be upset with the coach, right? Because it's not the coach's job to make them better than the other kid, right? It's the coach's job to win with the best of what he's got, right? So you have to make sure that you are the best of what he's got. And so you have to make yourself that recruitable athlete, right? That's one of the biggest things that has changed so much, especially when it comes to college, especially now with the portal, right? Is that coaches aren't trying to develop you for the next 2-3 years because they have no idea how long they're going to have you. Every single team it's like the NFL. Every single team is different every single year now. So we're trying to win right now, and we're going to recruit the best we have. I'll never forget whenever, I was in college, I was an All-American my sophomore year at my position, and I'm sitting there thinking, dude, going into my junior year, I'm the guy, right? All of a sudden, literally at my position, we had the best junior college defensive end that came in. We had a LSU transfer and an Ole Miss transfer, all in my position. I'm like, well, I'm competing for my position all over again, even though I'm the only return All-American, right? So it's extremely competitive in that nature, but what we let our athletes know and understand is that it's what you're doing outside of that stuff. And then, to be honest with you, the coaches that truly understand what it takes to get recruited, they really buy into what we're doing, right? And then we do have some of the coaches that have, a little bit of the ego trips. They're like, oh, we can do all this, we can do all that. But the reality is you can't argue with the results. It's like, okay, how many kids did you have go Division I from your high school last year? 1, 2, how many do we have? 55. Okay, so, it's a little different.
Yeah. And then I kind of want to talk about when you have because obviously in order to run a business and allow yourself to be able to do this long term, you have to charge people.
Right.
And I'm sure you have people come in all the time, like we just can't, we can't make the price work. How do you the results kind of speak for themselves, and the opportunities you can set up for yourselves through scholarships and whatnot. Yeah. What does that conversation look like when you have that conversation?
So, the funny thing is a lot of people, because, when they look at us and they're like, wow, this is going to be at least, a $6,000 to $9,000 a year investment, depending on what all we do. They're like, wow, that's a lot of money. And, but the reality is, and you would think that we just have a bunch of white collar kids here. And to be honest with you, we have a massive mix, of people. I can't tell you how many time I've had somebody come in and sign up and they look at their kid and they're like, hey, just so you know, don't ask for anything on your birthday. Don't ask for anything for Christmas. Don't ask to go on, we're giving up our vacation to do this. And what they do is people can always budget what they prioritize the most, and people find a way to prioritize this. Now, on the same token, there are some kids that we do scholarship where I'm like, listen, this kid hadn't even slept in his own bed, or in his own house for the last 2 years, right? we can take care of those kids. One thing I'm really excited about, and we're actually going to be doing this year, is launching a scholarship nonprofit foundation to actually be able to scholarship those underprivileged kids and be able to go to private businesses and obviously get them to a position where, they can donate to a nonprofit organization and actually know exactly where their money is going and specifically who their money is going into. And be like, look at how your, sponsorship is not just getting you all over our website and all over our social media and all over our facility and everything we're doing and on our shirts and stuff like that. But no, your money is actually going to changing this young man's life, right? Mm-hmm. And that's some of the things that we really have been. It's been on my heart to do for the last couple of years, and we're actually setting up the process to be able to hopefully have that done by this summer. So
yeah, that's super awesome. That's definitely rewarding to kind of start from where you guys were, and then coming into this new facility and finally being at the point, financially and community-wise, that you're able to make that decision, which I think is huge. And
I mean, obviously this is a passion-based business, but at the end of the day, it's still a business. And I tell people all the time, we take a lot of pride in impacting people's lives, but we can't impact anyone's lives if we're going broke, right? We've got to be able to pay the bills, right? Mm-hmm. I have phenomenal coaches. And one thing about phenomenal coaches is, and I'm very upfront with people, phenomenal coaches, they're not cheap, right? Yeah. I mean, you got to pay to keep them here. You got to keep these guys incentivized. You got to have incredible therapists. I mean, when you come in and you've got a place that, has a full-time doctor, PT, PTA, soft tissue specialist, massage therapist, all on staff, that's not cheap stuff. But at the end of the day, for $500 a month, being able to get unlimited cryotherapy, getting their body worked on once a week, getting, 3 times a week of speed training, getting 3 times a week of weight training, getting one to 2 times a week of position specific work. If you break that down, I mean, that's a steal. You know what I mean? Because I can tell you, when we first started doing this, we used to do all this stuff and it was all basically bought in sessions a la carte. This was years ago, gosh. This was probably when I first started 6 or 7 years ago. And what our people back then were getting so much less than they were getting now. And by doing it in a way that they were paying session packages rather than a monthly membership, it came down to, I think most of those people were paying somewhere between, probably at least $2,700 to $3,000 a month. And I was like, man, I wouldn't be able to afford this. We've got to figure out a way to make this more affordable, more graspable for everybody. So, and we luckily have been able to find that.
Yeah, definitely. And then I kind of want to close up with this one question for a young athlete who really just is aspiring to play Division I college football, and they don't have access to a facility like this, because I'm sure there are kids listening right now that don't have access to a facility like this. What actions can they be taking every day on their own, and how can they leverage the resources within their community to get to that level?
The one thing I would recommend them do is one thing that we have launched. We launched this last year, and we've had a lot of success with it, is we do have online coaching and online programming, right? I can make guys 8 to 12 week cycles that they can follow if they're looking to lift and do speed training specifically on their own. I've had kids literally not just all over the country, but all over the world that I've been able to impact with that. And it's through a phenomenal app that we use that's completely transparent. It gives them a way for them to be able to log their weights every day, log their load. It's going to tell them specifically what it is. It has video content on it that helps them know and understand exactly what to do. Very detailed outline of how to be coached. And obviously, what I personally love to do with that is if I can have a kid come down here for one of our spring break camps. They train with us for a week, so then they really understand what we're talking about. They've experienced it, and then they can go back to Seattle or Minnesota or Michigan or wherever they're from, and they can have that on-hand grasp, right, of what it really is, but then they go back with this program that they can follow. So that's a huge asset that we offer. And then one of the things that we do with kids all over the country is when they go in season, we actually will do in season Zoom studies. So I actually probably spend 80% of my time when we go in season football on my computer doing Zoom calls, doing film study breakdowns, and opponent breakdowns. So literally we'll spend 1 day a week where I'm going to evaluate all of their film from whether they're college, NFL, or college, NFL, or high school. where we'll spend an hour breaking down their film from, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And then I'll watch the team that they're playing this next week, put together a full scouting report, not just on the team that they're playing, but specifically on the individuals they're going against. If I'm working with the defensive ends, I'm going to tell that defensive end, all right, this is the way we're going to attack number 75 because he does this, this, and this, versus the way we're going to attack number 64, right? He's going to do this, this, and this. And I can't tell you how many times I remember I actually had an entire defensive line that I worked with last year on that. And we probably did 2 different studies that week breaking down their opponent. And then they went into that game, and that team had 13 sacks in one game. And they just called me back after the game. They're like, Coach, it was like the Matrix. Like, it was like we were seeing everything in code. Like, I mean, it felt like everything was in slow motion. I'm like, yeah, because you're learning how to become a student of the game.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to, give us this opportunity and let us into the facility and
Absolutely, man.
see how things operate. And I think this was a really great conversation. I hope a lot of people at home that were listening right now had a good listening experience, learned a lot. And thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for the platform, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Beautiful.